All right, let's go. Number 10. The Ica Stones of Peru, where the real mystery isn't one artifact, it's 50,000 of them. Buried across the deserts of southern Peru are massive engraved stones covered in scenes that should not exist. Humans hunting dinosaur-like creatures, detailed surgeries that resemble modern heart transplants, star maps charting skies centuries ahead of their time. Most ancient hoaxes fall apart under scale, but this one didn't stop at a handful of relics. It exploded into tens of thousands. And one man became completely consumed by them. Dr. Javier Cabrera, a local physician, amassed a collection of more than 15,000 of these stones before his death in 2001. He cataloged them obsessively, organizing them by theme and arguing that they represented a lost civilization with technology far surpassing anything known from the ancient Americas. The imagery was undeniable: sauropods with riders, triceratops locked in combat with spear-wielding hunters, surgical instruments recognizable to modern medicine. In 1966, Cabrera donated several stones to the National University of Engineering in Lima for analysis. Researchers confirmed the stones were genuine andesite, a volcanic rock common to the region, but the engravings themselves resisted dating. Unlike organic material, stone carvings cannot be carbon dated. The only way to verify their age would be through context, through stratigraphy, through association with datable artifacts, and that context was missing. Critics pointed to a confession. In 1996, a local farmer named Basilio Ushuaia admitted to carving many of the stones himself, selling them to tourists and collectors for profit. He demonstrated his technique on camera, using modern dental tools to etch designs into river rock. The confession seemed to close the case. Hoax, fraud, a cottage industry of fabricated antiquities designed to exploit Western fascination with the mysterious. But the confession came with a caveat. Ushuaia later recanted, claiming he had lied to avoid prosecution under Peruvian law, which forbids the sale of archaeological artifacts. He insisted he had only copied designs from genuine stones he had found in the hills. Cabrera himself refused to accept the hoax explanation, arguing that the sheer volume of stones, the consistency of the iconography, and the labor required to produce 15,000 detailed carvings made mass fabrication implausible. To put this in perspective, if Ushuaia carved just one stone per day using modern tools, it would take him over 40 years to produce Cabrera's collection alone. And Cabrera's collection represents only a fraction of the stones reported in the region. Some estimates suggest more than 50,000 stones exist in private collections and scattered across the Peruvian desert. What makes this discovery particularly unsettling is not the content of the engravings, which almost certainly reflect modern fabrication or misinterpretation. It is the scale, the devotion, the possibility that even if 99% of the stones are fake, the remaining 1% might point to something older, something unaccounted for in the accepted history of human settlement in South America. The Ica stones force an uncomfortable question. How do we distinguish between a hoax and an anomaly when the evidence itself has been contaminated beyond forensic recovery? The stones remain in storage in private collections, scattered across a desert that has seen cultures rise and fall for 10,000 years. We will likely never know their true origin. What we do know is that thousands of objects exist that should not, engraved with knowledge that contradicts every timeline we have built. Number 9. The Nampa Figurine, a doll from the Pliocene. On July 1889, workers drilling a well in Nampa, Idaho, pulled a pump from a depth of approximately 300 feet. Inside the mechanism, wedged between iron and sand, they found a small object no larger than a human thumb. It was a figurine, a clay statuette, expertly molded, depicting a human form with delicate proportions and traces of what appeared to be clothing or ornamentation. The geological layer from which the figurine emerged was dated to the Pliocene epoch, roughly 2 million years ago. At that depth, beneath multiple strata of basalt and clay, no human artifact should exist. Homo sapiens did not appear until approximately 300,000 years ago. The earliest known human ancestors capable of crafting representational art, Homo habilis or Homo erectus, were not present in North America during the Pliocene. No migration, no settlement, no archaeological evidence of any kind. In 1912, Professor Albert A. Wright of Oberlin College examined the figurine and noted its craftsmanship. The proportions were anatomically correct. The surface showed signs of deliberate firing, suggesting kilning or controlled heat exposure. The material was consistent with terracotta clay. Wright concluded that the object was undeniably artificial, but he could offer no explanation for its presence at such a depth. Skeptics proposed contamination. Perhaps the figurine fell into the borehole from the surface. Perhaps it was introduced by workers as a prank. Perhaps the geological context was misreported, but the drilling crew insisted the object emerged from within the pump itself, encrusted with the same iron oxide and clay that coated the deeper strata. No signs of recent disturbance, no evidence of insertion. The figurine was later donated to the Idaho State Historical Society, where it remains today. Modern analysts have avoided definitive commentary. The object has never been subjected to thermoluminescence dating, a technique that could confirm the age of fired clay. Without such analysis, the figurine exists in a state of epistemological suspension, too strange to accept, too documented to dismiss. What makes this discovery particularly unsettling is the silence it demands. If the figurine is authentic, it obliterates accepted human chronology. If it is a hoax with no clear motive, no audience, no fame attached. The workers who found it were not archaeologists, they were drillers. They reported what they saw. The object exists. The depth is recorded. The contradiction remains unresolved. Somewhere beneath the plains of Idaho, in sediments older than our species, a small clay figure was pulled from the earth. It depicts us, and it should not be there. Number 8. Göbekli Tepe, the temple before civilization. In 1963, a survey team working in southeastern Turkey noted an unusual limestone ridge near the town of Şanlıurfa. Local farmers called the site Göbekli Tepe, which translates to Potbelly Hill. The surveyors noted fragments of worked stone scattered across the surface and cataloged the location as a probable medieval cemetery. They moved on. In 1994, German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt re-examined the site. Within hours of excavation, his team uncovered something that should not exist. Massive T-shaped limestone pillars, some weighing more than 10 tons, arranged in circular formations and carved with intricate reliefs of animals. Foxes, boars, vultures, serpents, scorpions. The pillars stood upright, deliberately placed, aligned with a precision that suggested planning, labor coordination, and symbolic purpose. Radiocarbon dating of organic material embedded in the mortar returned results that defied expectation. The structures were approximately 11,600 years old, older than Stonehenge by 6,000 years, older than the pyramids of Egypt by 7,000 years, older than the invention of agriculture. In 2000, Schmidt published findings in the journal Neolithics, arguing that Göbekli Tepe represented a paradigm shift in the understanding of Neolithic society. The site was built by hunter-gatherers. No evidence of domesticated plants, no evidence of permanent settlement, no pottery, no wheels, no written language. And yet, these people quarried multi-ton stones, transported them across ridges, carved them with representational art, and erected them in geometrically sophisticated arrangements. To put this in perspective, the construction of Göbekli Tepe required an estimated workforce of hundreds, possibly thousands, laboring over decades. The logistical coordination alone implies social hierarchy, specialized roles, and a shared symbolic framework. These were not scattered bands of nomads. They were organized. They had religion. They had architecture. and they had it 6,000 years before the first cities. In 2017, researchers at the German Archaeological Institute used ground-penetrating radar to survey the unexcavated portions of the site. The results suggested at least 20 additional circular structures buried beneath the surface. Only a fraction of Göbekli Tepe has been revealed. The majority remains underground. What makes this discovery particularly unsettling is the inversion it demands. For more than a century, the narrative of human development followed a clear sequence. Hunter-gatherers became farmers, farmers built villages, villages became cities, cities developed religion and monumental architecture. Göbekli Tepe reverses the order. Religion came first, architecture came first. The temple preceded the farm. The implications ripple outward. If humans built monumental sacred sites before they planted crops, then symbolic thought, shared belief, and collective labor are not products of settled life. They are preconditions. The stones at Göbekli Tepe were raised by people who had no cities, no kings, no taxes. They built because they believed, and what they believed was strong enough to move mountains. Göbekli Tepe was deliberately buried around 8000 BCE. The pillars were covered with rubble and soil, entombed in a single coordinated act. No one knows why. The site was abandoned. The structures were hidden. The memory was erased. And for 10,000 years, the first temple on Earth waited in silence beneath a hill that no one thought to excavate. Number 7. The Shigir Idol, the oldest sculpture in the world. In 1890, gold miners working in a peat bog near Yekaterinburg, Russia, discovered fragments of a large wooden object buried approximately 13 feet below the surface. The fragments were waterlogged, blackened by tannins, and covered in geometric carvings. Over the course of several excavations, additional pieces were recovered and transported to the Yekaterinburg Historical Museum, where curator Vladimir Talmashev attempted to reconstruct the object. What emerged was a statue, a carved larch figure standing nearly 10 feet tall, its surface covered with zigzag lines, chevrons, and stylized faces. The faces were haunting, wide eyes, open mouths, expressions that seemed to shift depending on the angle of light. The body was flat and plank-like, designed to be viewed from the front, covered in symbols that bore no resemblance to any known writing system. For decades, the Shigir Idol was assumed to be a few thousand years old, a relic of Bronze Age Siberian shamanism. But in 1997, researchers at the Russian Academy of Sciences applied radiocarbon dating to samples taken from the statue's core. The results were extraordinary. The idol was approximately 11,500 years old, older than Göbekli Tepe, older than the earliest known settlements in Europe, older than any other wooden sculpture ever discovered. In 2018, a second round of dating conducted by a team from the University of Göttingen in Germany confirmed the results. The Shigir Idol was carved around 9,500 BCE during the early Mesolithic period by people living in the Ural Mountains at the end of the last ice age. The precision of the carving suggested metal tools, but no metal tools existed in the region at that time. The symbols suggested language, but no written language existed anywhere on Earth. Professor Thomas Terberger, who led the 2018 study, published findings in the journal Antiquity, stating that the idol represents the oldest known example of monumental art created by hunter-gatherers. The carvings, he argued, may represent a symbolic or proto-writing system, a visual language used to encode myths, cosmology, or territorial markers. To put this in perspective, the Shigir Idol was carved 6,000 years before the Sumerians invented cuneiform. The people who made it had no cities, no agriculture, no pottery. They lived in a frozen forest at the edge of a retreating ice sheet, and they carved a 10-foot statue covered in symbols that we cannot read. What makes this discovery particularly unsettling is the implication that symbolic thought, the foundation of all human culture, is far older and far more developed than previously assumed. The Shigir Idol is not primitive. It is sophisticated. The faces are expressive. The symbols are deliberate. The craftsmanship rivals objects created thousands of years later by settled civilizations. The statue survived because it was buried in peat, a low-oxygen environment that prevents decay. How many other sculptures, how many other symbols, how many other voices from the Mesolithic were lost because they were not preserved? We are left with one object, one voice, one fragment of a symbolic world that spanned continents and millennia before the first word was ever written. The Shigir Idol stands in a museum in Yekaterinburg, behind glass, silent. Its makers are gone. Their language is gone. Their world is gone. But the statue remains, covered in messages we cannot decipher, staring out across 11,500 years with eyes that still seem to see. Number 6. Derinkuyu, the city beneath the earth. In 1963, a man renovating his home in the Cappadocia region of central Turkey broke through a basement wall and discovered a tunnel. The tunnel led to another room. That room led to another passage. The passage descended into darkness. What he had found was Derinkuyu, a massive underground city carved directly into the soft volcanic rock of the Cappadocian Plateau. The city extended 18 stories beneath the surface, reaching a depth of approximately 280 feet. It contained ventilation shafts, wells, storage rooms, livestock pens, wine presses, chapels, and communal halls. The structure could house an estimated 20,000 people, along with their animals and food supplies, for extended periods of time. Archaeologists believe Derinkuyu was first excavated during the Hittite period, around 1400 BCE, although some chambers may be older. The city was expanded over centuries by successive civilizations, including the Phrygians, Persians, and early Christians fleeing Roman persecution. But the original purpose of the city remains unclear. In 2014, researchers at Nevşehir University used ground-penetrating radar to survey the surrounding region. They discovered that Derinkuyu is not an isolated site. It is connected to at least 36 other underground cities via a network of tunnels spanning miles. The entire region is honeycombed with subterranean chambers, some of which have never been fully mapped. The construction required the removal of an estimated 1 million cubic meters of rock. The labor involved was staggering, the planning even more so. Each level was designed with defensive features. Massive circular stone doors, weighing up to 1,000 pounds, could be rolled into place to seal off sections of the city from the inside. Ventilation shafts were deliberately designed to prevent poisoning from above. Water wells were dug deep enough to remain inaccessible to surface attacks. To put this in perspective, Derinkuyu is not a shelter. It is a fortress, a self-sustaining underground ecosystem designed for long-term survival against an unspecified threat. The people who built it were not hiding from a passing army. They were preparing for prolonged siege, for invasion, for something that required them to disappear beneath the earth for months or years at a time. What makes this discovery particularly unsettling is the question it forces. What were they afraid of? The historical record offers partial answers: invasions, religious persecution, raids by nomadic tribes, but the scale of Derinkuyu suggests something more. A fear so persistent, so existential that entire populations chose to live in darkness rather than face it. The city was used continuously for more than 3,000 years. Families were born underground. Children grew up in tunnels. Generations lived and died in chambers lit only by oil lamps, breathing air pulled from shafts that reached the surface hundreds of feet above. And then, sometime in the early 20th century, the city was abandoned. The tunnels were sealed. The entrances were forgotten. Derinkuyu was rediscovered by accident. Beneath the hills of Cappadocia, beneath the vineyards and the towns and the highways, the cities remain, waiting, empty, built for a catastrophe that may never have come, or may have been so complete that no record of it survived. Number 5. The Bagong Pipes, metal in stone. In 1998, a group of Chinese researchers exploring the remote Qinghai province near Mount Baigong discovered a series of structures that defied immediate explanation. On the southern shore of Lake Qinghai, inside a pyramidal rock formation, they found cave openings. Inside the caves, embedded directly into the rock face, were dozens of pipe-like formations. The pipes were metallic, they were hollow, and they penetrated deep into the stone. The pipes ranged in diameter from less than an inch to more than a foot. Some extended horizontally into the cave walls. Others descended vertically into the ground. A few emerged from the rock and extended into the lakebed itself, submerged beneath water that had covered them for an unknown span of time. The metal was reddish-brown, corroded by age, but unmistakably artificial in appearance. In 2002, researchers from the Qinghai Institute of Salt Lakes collected samples and subjected them to chemical analysis. The results were published in Chinese scientific journals and later reported in state media. The pipes contained iron oxide, silicon dioxide, calcium oxide, and trace amounts of rare earth elements. The composition was unusual, not pure iron, not bronze, not any alloy commonly used in historical Chinese metallurgy. The immediate interpretation was industrial, ancient pipelines, a water system, evidence of a lost civilization with advanced engineering. Chinese media briefly speculated about extraterrestrial origin, a narrative fueled by the pipe's remote location and their presence inside solid rock. But the speculation faded as geologists proposed alternative explanations. In 2007, Professor Zheng Jiandong of the China Earthquake Administration published findings suggesting the pipes were fossilized tree roots. The argument was straightforward. In sedimentary environments rich in iron, organic material can undergo a process called pseudomorphic replacement, in which minerals gradually replace the cellular structure of wood, preserving its shape while transforming its composition. The result is a pipe-like fossil made of iron oxide that resembles a manufactured tube. The hypothesis was plausible. Tree roots grow in hollow, branching patterns. Over millions of years, buried in mineral-rich sediment, they could fossilize into the formations observed at Baigong. But questions remained. The pipes were remarkably uniform. Their distribution was geometric, and several pipes extended into the lakebed in orientations inconsistent with root growth. To put this in perspective, fossilized tree roots do exist in the geological record, but they are typically fragmented, irregular, and confined to organic-rich sediment layers. The Baigong pipes are embedded in rock formations dated to the Triassic period, approximately 150 million years ago. No trees existed in that region during the Triassic, no forests, no flora capable of producing root systems of that scale. What makes this discovery particularly unsettling is the lack of resolution. The site has not been extensively excavated. The pipes have not been subjected to modern isotopic analysis. The formations remain in place, embedded in rock, corroding slowly in the dry air of the Qinghai Plateau. They may be fossils. They may be natural mineral formations shaped by geological processes we do not fully understand, or they may be something else entirely. The Baigong pipes are not evidence of ancient technology, but they are evidence of how easily the unfamiliar can be mistaken for the impossible. In remote places, in deep time, the boundary between natural and artificial dissolves. What remains is metal and stone, hollow tubes in a cave, and no definitive answer to the question of how they came to be. Number 4. The Ica Stones, a hoax that will not die. In 1938, according to widely circulated reports, Chinese archaeologist Kai Pu-te led an expedition into the Bayan-Har Mountains on the border between China and Tibet. There, inside a series of caves, the team allegedly discovered a burial site containing 716 stone discs, each approximately 1 foot in diameter, with a circular hole in the center and a double-grooved spiral inscription running from the center to the edge. The discs, later called the Ica Stones, were said to be approximately 12,000 years old. In 1962, Professor Tsoom Nui of the Beijing Academy for Ancient Studies purportedly deciphered the inscriptions, revealing a story of a spacecraft that crash-landed in the mountains. The survivors, a group of extraterrestrial beings called the Dropa, were stranded and eventually integrated with local tribes. The inscriptions described their arrival, their struggle, and their gradual extinction. The story spread rapidly, books were published, photographs circulated. UFO researchers cited the Dropa stones as evidence of ancient contact. The narrative was compelling: remote location, ancient symbols, a lost people, a cosmic tragedy written in stone. But no credible evidence supports any part of the story. No archaeologist named Kai Pu-te appears in Chinese academic records. No institution called the Beijing Academy for Ancient Studies existed in 1962. No Professor Tsoom Nui can be verified. The photographs of the stones that circulated in the 1960s and 70s show objects resembling jade by discs, ceremonial objects common in Chinese archaeology, with no unusual inscriptions visible. In 1994, Austrian researcher Peter Krasa published a book claiming to have examined two of the stones in a museum in Guangzhou. He described them as heavy, granite-like objects covered in microscopic grooves. But when investigators attempted to verify his claims, the museum denied ever possessing such artifacts. The stones, if they ever existed, had vanished. In 2007, researchers at the University of Bonn analyzed a disc allegedly from the Dropa collection. The object was determined to be a modern reproduction, carved from soapstone, with no archaeological context. The grooves were shallow and decorative. The material was consistent with 20th century fabrication. To put this in perspective, no credible museum holds a Dropa stone. No peer-reviewed publication describes them. No original excavation report exists. The entire narrative appears to be a mid-20th century fabrication, possibly originating from Soviet UFO literature and amplified by Western pseudo-archaeology. What makes this story particularly unsettling is not its falsehood, it is its persistence. The Dropa stones continue to appear in documentaries, books, and online forums as evidence of ancient mysteries. The story has been debunked repeatedly. The evidence has been exposed as fraudulent. And yet the narrative endures, passed from one generation of believers to the next, immune to correction. The Dropa stones are a reminder that human beings crave the impossible. We want to believe that we are not alone, that the past holds secrets, that stone can speak across millennia and reveal truths our ancestors could not record. The stones do not exist, but the desire for them does, and that desire is powerful enough to manufacture evidence where none can be found. Somewhere in the mountains between China and Tibet, caves hold burial sites. Real burials, real people, real stories lost to time. But those stories are not written in stone discs. They are written in bones, in tools, in the slow accumulation of evidence that requires patience and rigor to interpret. The truth is harder to find than the fiction, and far less comforting. Number 3. The Oklo Natural Nuclear Reactor, Fission Before Humanity. In 1972, French physicist Francis Perrin examined uranium samples imported from the Oklo mine in Gabon, West Africa. The samples were destined for use in nuclear reactors, and routine isotopic analysis was standard procedure. But the results were abnormal. The uranium-235 content was lower than expected, significantly lower. Natural uranium contains approximately 0.72% uranium-235, the isotope required for nuclear fission. The Oklo samples contained only 0.717%. The difference was small, but in nuclear chemistry, small differences indicate massive events. Perrin suspected contamination, or theft, or measurement error, but further analysis revealed something extraordinary. The uranium had been depleted through fission, not in a modern reactor, not in a laboratory in the ground. Naturally, approximately 1.7 billion years ago. In 1975, researchers at the French Atomic Energy Commission published findings in the journal Nature, confirming that the Göbekli deposit had functioned as a natural nuclear reactor during the Paleoproterozoic era. The conditions were precise: uranium ore, concentrated by geological processes, groundwater acting as a neutron moderator, a sandstone layer providing structural containment. The reactor operated intermittently for hundreds of thousands of years, producing an estimated 100 kilowatts of thermal energy and consuming roughly 6 tons of uranium-235. To put this in perspective, the Göbekli reactor achieved sustained nuclear fission 1.7 billion years before human beings existed. The reaction was self-regulating. When groundwater boiled away, the reaction stopped. When the water returned, fission resumed. The cycle repeated for millennia, leaving isotopic signatures in the surrounding rock that remain detectable today. The discovery forced a reevaluation of planetary geochemistry. Natural nuclear reactors require specific conditions: high uranium concentration, sufficient water, low neutron-absorbing elements. These conditions existed at Göbekli because Earth's atmosphere had recently been oxygenated by cyanobacteria, allowing uranium to dissolve and migrate in groundwater. The reactor is a byproduct of biology, of oxygen, of life reshaping the planet. In 2004, researchers at Washington University in St. Louis analyzed fission byproducts preserved in the Göbekli Formation. They found isotopes of neodymium and ruthenium consistent with controlled nuclear reactions. The waste had not migrated. It remained locked in place, contained by geological structures that had not shifted in nearly 2 billion years. What makes this discovery particularly unsettling is the realization that Earth has been geologically active in ways we are only beginning to understand. Nuclear fission is not a human invention. It is a natural process, one that can occur under the right planetary conditions without intelligence, without intent, without oversight. Number 2. The Bosnian Pyramid Complex, a mountain or a monument. In 2005, Bosnian-American researcher Semir Osmanagic announced the discovery of what he claimed were ancient pyramids near the town of Visoko in central Bosnia. The largest formation, a hill called Visačica, rises approximately 720 feet above the valley floor and exhibits geometric features: triangular faces, flat surfaces, orientation aligned roughly with cardinal directions. Osmanagic argued that Visačica and several nearby hills were not natural formations but human-made structures, buried beneath soil and vegetation over thousands of years. He founded the Archaeological Park, Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun Foundation, and began excavation. Within months, his team uncovered paved terraces, stone blocks, and tunnel networks beneath the hills. The claims attracted international attention. Supporters cited evidence of construction: stone slabs with uniform dimensions, concrete-like material between blocks, tunnels with carved walls and ventilation shafts. Osmanagic proposed that the pyramids were built approximately 12,000 years ago by an advanced European civilization, predating Egypt and Mesopotamia by millennia. In 2006, the European Association of Archaeologists issued a formal statement condemning the excavations. The statement, signed by prominent archaeologists from across Europe, declared that the Bosnian pyramid claims were pseudoscientific and that the excavations were damaging legitimate archaeological sites. Geological surveys confirmed that Visačica was a natural formation, a flatiron hill shaped by tectonic forces and erosion. But the excavations continued. Osmanagic's team uncovered more tunnels, more stone blocks, more anomalies that resisted easy explanation. In 2012, independent researchers measured electromagnetic frequencies emanating from the apex of Visačica, reporting a signal at 28 kHz. The source of the signal was unclear. In 2017, Professor Paolo De Bertales of the University of Trieste conducted acoustic tests inside the tunnel network and reported unusual resonance properties. The tunnels, he argued, exhibited sound frequencies inconsistent with natural cave formations. But his findings were not peer-reviewed, and mainstream archaeology remained dismissive. To put this in perspective, the Bosnian pyramid hypothesis lacks the evidentiary foundation required for acceptance. No artifacts, no carbon-datable materials, no stratigraphic context. The stone blocks could be natural conglomerate. The tunnels could be medieval mining shafts. The electromagnetic signals could be instrumentation error. Every piece of evidence has a conventional explanation. What makes this case particularly unsettling is not the evidence itself. It is the passion it inspires. Thousands of volunteers have traveled to Visoko to assist with excavations. The site has become a pilgrimage destination. Local businesses depend on tourism revenue generated by the pyramid narrative. The government of Bosnia has invested in infrastructure to support the archaeological park. The truth has become secondary to belief. Even if Visočica is proven beyond doubt to be a natural hill, the cultural impact of the pyramid hypothesis will remain. A story has taken root. A story about forgotten civilizations, lost knowledge, and a European heritage older than any recorded history. The story is almost certainly false, but it fills a need, a desire to belong to something ancient, something monumental, something worth uncovering. Beneath the hills of Bosnia, tunnels wind through the stone. Some are natural, some were carved by miners centuries ago, some may be older. The archaeological community has moved on, but the excavations continue, and the question remains, not whether the pyramids are real, but why we need them to be. Number 1. The Longyou Caves, precision without record. In 1992, a farmer in Longyou County, Zhejiang Province, China, decided to drain a local pond. The pond, called Zhaiyananhai, had been a fixture of the village for generations. Local legend held that the pond was bottomless, that it connected to underground rivers, that strange sounds sometimes echoed from its depths. As the water level dropped, the farmer discovered an opening, a tunnel carved into solid siltstone. He entered with a flashlight and found himself in a cavern, not a natural cave, a chamber, carved with walls, ceilings, and pillars. The ceiling rose approximately 30 feet above the floor. The walls were covered in uniform chisel marks, arranged in parallel rows, angled at precisely 60 degrees. Within weeks, local authorities drained 4 additional ponds in the area. Each concealed a similar chamber. By 1998, a total of 24 caves had been discovered, covering an estimated 30,000 square meters of underground space. The caves were interconnected by narrow passages. The walls were smooth. The floors were level. The pillars were load-bearing, carved from the same bedrock as the chambers themselves. The precision was extraordinary. The chisel marks were uniform across all 24 caves. The tool angles were consistent. The spacing between marks suggested a standardized technique, replicated by multiple workers over an extended period. The volume of stone removed was estimated at approximately 1 million cubic meters, and there is no historical record of the excavation. In 2006, Professor Yang Hongsun, a specialist in ancient Chinese architecture, visited the site and noted the structural sophistication. The pillars were positioned to distribute weight across the ceiling. The ventilation was deliberate. The drainage was functional. The caves were designed for long-term use, but for what purpose, he could not determine. To put this in perspective, the excavation of the Longyou Caves would have required thousands of workers laboring for years, possibly decades. The coordination alone suggests state-level organization, imperial backing, massive resource allocation, and yet no Chinese historical text, no chronicle, no local record mentions the construction. The caves appear in no dynastic histories, no maps, no archives. What makes this discovery particularly unsettling is the absence, not the absence of answers, the absence of questions. The caves were built, used or abandoned and deliberately concealed. The ponds that covered them were not natural. They were flooded intentionally, sealed with water to prevent access or discovery. Someone wanted these chambers hidden, and they succeeded for centuries, possibly millennia. The walls offer no clues. The chisel marks are decorative, not symbolic. No writing, no images, no indication of who did the carving or why. The stone itself resists dating. Siltstone can be carved at any point in history. Without organic material, without context, the age of the caves remains speculative. Estimates range from 2,000 years ago to 200 years ago. But local records show no large-scale construction in the region during the Qing or Ming dynasties. The Longyou Caves are not lost. They are open to the public. Tourists walk through the chambers. Lights illuminate the chisel marks. Signs offer tentative explanations, but the core mystery persists. Who built this? Why? And how did an excavation of this scale vanish from human memory? The answer may be simple. Records were lost, archives burned, oral history faded. Civilizations forget. They forget their monuments, their wars, their achievements. Given enough time, even the grandest projects dissolve into legend and legend into silence. The Longyou Caves stand as proof that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Beneath the surface of the world we think we know, vast projects lie hidden, not because they were impossible, but because no one thought to remember them. The caves were carved by human hands. The stone was removed by human labor. The chambers were sealed by human decision. And then, for reasons we may never understand, the memory was erased. We live in a world built on forgetting. The Longyou Caves are not the exception. They are the rule. How many other works, how many other cities, how many other voices have been buried beneath water, beneath soil, beneath the weight of centuries? The caves are a warning, not of catastrophe, but of impermanence, of the ease with which even the monumental can be lost. The chambers remain, empty, waiting, carved with marks that say nothing except this: we were here, we built this, and then we were gone. If you want to see more videos like this, click the video on screen now and make sure to subscribe.